Hello, everyone, and welcome to the solemnity this year of Saints Peter and Paul. We don't usually have this, but since this falls on the 29th of June, which I remember because it's my mom's birthday, happy birthday, Mom, we're celebrating Saint Peter and Paul. You know, I've gotten a few calls this week. We're really blessed of people who are interested in becoming Catholic. And one of the questions that I get asked when these situations happen is, what's different about Catholicism? Of all the forms of Christianity, what is it about Catholicism that kind of sets it apart, or why is there Catholics than other groups? And one of the distinctions I think about us is that we are all about family. And I'm not trying to insult other Christians saying they're not about family, of course. But in order to understand Catholicism, you have to understand family, right? And the thing about what we're celebrating today, Saints Peter and Paul, is we're celebrating two of our family members in heaven. Okay, Saints Peter and Paul, they're in heaven, and they're so important that we give them their own feast day. And Jesus founded our church. Let's be very clear. But Saint Peter and Paul were big movers in that. Okay, Saint Peter is our first pope, and then Saint Paul, right, is probably the greatest evangelist of all time. I'll put the Blessed Virgin Mary is probably the best, but Saint Paul in the Scriptures. We have more books from him in the New Testament than anyone else. And you see this radical change that he has, which we'll get to in a moment. But we picked Peter and Paul also because of how completely human they are. And that where I was going with St. Paul. First of all, St. Paul was a devout Jew, and he was persecuting Christianity because he thought it was wrong. And to the point where they say that when St. Stephen, our first deacon, was killed, St. Paul was watching, and he approved of it. And then all of a sudden he meets the Lord, and he does a complete about-face. And so you can definitely see that St. Paul was a man of integrity. When he sees the truth, he goes after it. Okay, and that's what a wonderful guy to have in our family, right? And so he completely is repentant, and he goes about then spreading the message of Jesus, who he was persecuting. And that's what Jesus said, why is it that you are persecuting me? And he spends the rest of his life proclaiming the good news. St. Peter, the same thing. St. Peter is kind of impetuous. He always just does he says the first thing that comes into his mind, gets himself in trouble a lot. But we kind of like that about him, because then we can learn from St. Peter, okay, another great family member. And Jesus continues to forgive him, and he ends up becoming our first pope. And I think I've talked about this gospel before. It's the three times that Jesus asks Simon, son of John, do you love me? And we kind of lose the meaning of some of this passage because it was originally in the Greek. At least the earliest copies that we have of the New Testament are in the Greek. And so he's asking, remember, Peter denied Jesus 3 times. And so then he's got this, after the resurrection, here he is with this encounter of Peter, and he asked Simon, son of John, do you love me? But what Jesus is asking is, do you agape me? Do you love me as God, right? And Peter answers, well, you know that I philos you. I love you as a brother, right? So Peter, even then, is still not ready to answer God, like, do you love me as God? No, I think I philos you. And then a second time, Jesus asked, do you agape me? Do you love me as God? And Peter again answers, you know that I philos you. I love you as a brother. And so the third time that Jesus asks, he asks, Simon, son of John, do you philos me as a brother? And then you see that that Peter gets saddened by this question, because he's like, yeah, Lord, you know everything. You know at this point I'm really only able to philos you. And Jesus accepts that of Peter. And he says, okay, come follow me anyway. Feed my lambs, come follow me. And that's really important, because Jesus will meet us where we are at. He met Paul where he was at, right? But we're not allowed to stay there. With God's grace, we have to continue to grow and grow. So you have this scared St. Peter, and you have this Paul who was persecuting the church, and look where Jesus met them at. But then they end up becoming the great men that they are, and those are our family members who are interceding for us. So as we approach the table of the Lord today and we receive Jesus, let us ask through the intercessions of St. Peter and Paul that we're not just staying where Jesus is meeting us at, but that through his grace, through his help, we'll become the great people that we're called to be, the saints we're called to be, and one day see him in heaven face to face.